welcome to LES, Learn English Through Story. I'm Harry, your host for today's special adventure. Are you ready for an incredible journey? Today, we're going to explore a story that's happening right now in Southeast Asia. Get ready, everyone, because this story will take you on an exciting journey about when neighbors disagree, the Thailand Cambodia border conflict. You know, sometimes even countries that live next to each other can have big disagreements. Just like when you and your neighbor might argue about where your garden ends and theirs begins, countries can argue about their borders too. But what happens when these disagreements become serious? What happens when thousands of people have to leave their homes? Today, my friend Tom will tell you an amazing story about two countries, Thailand and Cambodia, and how a disagreement about their border became much bigger than anyone expected. Tom has a gift for storytelling, and he'll take you through this complex situation step by step. So sit back, relax, and let Tom guide you through this important story that's happening right now in our world. Tom, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Tom here, and wow, what a story I have for you today. Are you sitting comfortably? Good, because this is a story about two countries, thousands of people, and a border that has caused problems for many years. Chapter 1: The Quiet Border That Wasn't Quiet. Let me start by painting a picture for you. Imagine you live in a small village. Your house is very close to another country. You can see the other country from your window. You can walk to the other country in just a few minutes. This is exactly how many people live along the border between Thailand and Cambodia. For years, people living in these border areas lived normal, peaceful lives. Farmers grew rice in their fields. Children played in the streets. Families visited relatives on both sides of the border. The border was just an invisible line to them, nothing more than a mark on a map. But under this peaceful surface, something was growing. Both Thailand and Cambodia believed they owned certain pieces of land along their border. This disagreement had been quiet for many years, like a sleeping volcano. However, in July 2025, this sleeping volcano woke up. The trouble began in a place called Prasat Ta Muentom. This is an ancient temple area that both countries claim belongs to them. It's like two people saying, "This is my house," about the same house. Both countries put soldiers in this area to protect what they believed was their land. July 23rd, 2025, something terrible happened. Thai soldiers were walking along the border, doing their normal patrol work. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. The soldiers had stepped on landmines, hidden bombs in the ground. 5 Thai soldiers were hurt. 1 soldier lost his leg. This was not an accident. Someone had put these dangerous bombs there on purpose. The Thai government was very angry. They said Cambodia had put these landmines there to hurt Thai soldiers. They called this an attack on Thailand. The situation was getting dangerous very quickly. Chapter 2: When Words Turn into Actions. What happens when two countries get very angry with each other? First, they use words. The Thai government made an official complaint. They said Cambodia was being aggressive and dangerous. They demanded an explanation. But Cambodia had a different story. The Cambodian government said the Thai soldiers were in Cambodian territory. They said Thailand was the one being aggressive by sending soldiers into Cambodia. Both countries were pointing fingers at each other, like children arguing in a playground. The Thai government decided to take strong action. They called their ambassador back from Cambodia. An ambassador is like a messenger between countries. When you call your ambassador back, it means you're very upset. Thailand also told the Cambodian ambassador to leave Thailand. This was like saying, "We don't want to talk to you anymore." But the real problem was still there. Both countries still had soldiers near the same pieces of land. Both countries believed they were right. The tension was growing every hour. On the morning of July 24th, the situation exploded. Thai and Cambodian soldiers faced each other across the disputed border. Nobody knows exactly who fired the first shot, but suddenly, soldiers from both sides were shooting at each other, and the sound of gunfire filled the air. This was no longer just an argument with words. This was real fighting between two countries. The border conflict had turned into border clashes. Chapter 3: The Day Everything Changed. July 24th, 2025 started like any normal day for thousands of people living along the Thailand Cambodia border. Children were getting ready for school, adults were preparing for work. Nobody expected their lives to change completely in just a few hours. But by 10 a.m., everything was different. The fighting between Thai and Cambodian soldiers was getting worse. It wasn't happening in just one place. Soldiers were fighting at multiple locations along the border. The sound of guns and explosions could be heard from villages on both sides. Then came the most shocking news of all. Thailand used fighter jets to bomb targets inside Cambodia. These were not just small fights between soldiers anymore. This was serious military action between two countries. The jets flew over the border and dropped bombs on Cambodian positions. For people living in the area, this was terrifying. Imagine hearing the sound of jet engines overhead, knowing that bombs might fall from the sky. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Families packed whatever they could carry and left their homes. The casualties started to mount. By the end of the first day, at least 14 people had died in Thailand, and one person had died in Cambodia. These weren't just soldiers. Some were ordinary people who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The border conflict had claimed innocent lives. The Thai health authorities worked quickly to help the wounded. Hospitals near the border became very busy. Doctors and nurses worked day and night to save lives, but the fighting was far from over. Chapter 4: The Great Escape. What would you do if someone told you that your home was no longer safe? What would you take with you if you had to leave everything behind in just a few minutes? This is exactly what happened to more than 135,000 people living along the Thailand-Cambodia border. The evacuation was massive. Entire villages emptied in hours. Schools closed immediately. Buses and trucks arrived to take people to safety, but there weren't enough vehicles for everyone. Many people had to walk, carrying their children and whatever belongings they could manage. Mrs. Suraporn, a 45-year-old teacher from a Thai border village, described her experience. "I heard the explosions getting closer and closer. My children were crying. I grabbed our important documents, some clothes, and we ran. I didn't even have time to lock our door." On the Cambodian side, similar scenes were unfolding. Families who had lived in the same villages for generations were forced to leave. Some elderly people had to be carried because they couldn't walk fast enough. Pet dogs and cats were left behind because there wasn't space in the evacuation vehicles. The displacement was heartbreaking. Temporary camps were set up in schools and government buildings far from the border. People slept on floors with just blankets. There wasn't enough food or clean water for everyone. Children cried for their toys left behind at home, but the human spirit is amazing. In these difficult times, people helped each other. Neighbors who had never spoken before shared their food. Strangers gave rides to families with no transportation. Local businesses donated supplies to the displaced people. The evacuation showed something important. When there's a conflict between countries, it's always ordinary people who suffer the most. Chapter 5: The Second Day of Fire. If people hoped the fighting would stop after one day, they were disappointed. July 25th brought even more violence. The clashes continued with even greater intensity. Both sides brought more soldiers and heavier weapons to the border area. The fighting was no longer limited to the original disputed area. Soldiers were shooting at each other at more than a dozen different locations along the border. It was like the conflict was spreading like wildfire. International news reporters arrived to cover the story. Television cameras showed the world what was happening. Smoke rose from multiple points along the border. The sound of artillery could be heard constantly. Fighter jets continued to fly overhead. The death toll increased. By the second day, at least 19 people had been killed, 13 civilians and 6 soldiers in Thailand, and more casualties in Cambodia. Each number represented a real person, someone's father, mother, child, or friend. World leaders began to pay attention. The fighting between Thailand and Cambodia was no longer just a local problem. It was becoming an international crisis. Other countries started to worry about the stability of Southeast Asia. The economic impact was immediate. The border crossings, which normally handled millions of dollars in trade every day, were completely closed. Trucks carrying goods between the two countries had to turn back. Businesses on both sides started to lose money. Tourism, which is very important for both countries, stopped immediately in the border areas. Hotels and restaurants lost all their customers. Tour guides had no work. The conflict was hurting everyone's livelihood. Chapter 6: The World Watches and Worries. When two countries start fighting, it's never just about those two countries. Other nations around the world watch carefully and worry about what might happen next. The Thailand-Cambodia border conflict was no exception. The United Nations Security Council called an urgent meeting. Representatives from many countries gathered to discuss the situation. They were very concerned that the fighting might spread or get even worse. The Secretary General called for both sides to stop fighting immediately and start talking instead. China, which has good relationships with both Thailand and Cambodia, offered to help solve the problem. Chinese diplomats contacted leaders in both countries. They said China was ready to act as a mediator, someone who helps two sides reach an agreement. The United States also expressed concern. American officials said they supported peaceful solutions to border disputes. They urged both countries to stop the violence and return to negotiations. Other Southeast Asian countries were particularly worried. Vietnam, Laos, and Malaysia are all neighbors in the same region. They knew that if the fighting continued, it could affect trade, tourism, and stability throughout Southeast Asia. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, which includes both Thailand and Cambodia, held emergency discussions. ASEAN believes in solving problems through talking, not fighting. They sent special ambassadors to both countries to encourage peace. International humanitarian organizations rushed to help the displaced people. The Red Cross sent medical supplies and food. UNICEF focused on helping the children who had been forced to leave their homes. These organizations reminded the world that real people were suffering because of this conflict. Chapter 7, Looking for Answers in History. To understand why Thailand and Cambodia were fighting, we need to look back at history. Border disputes between these two countries are not new. They have been arguing about their borders for more than 100 years. The problem started during the colonial period. In the 1800s and early 1900s, European powers controlled much of Southeast Asia. The French controlled Cambodia, while Thailand remained independent. When the French drew maps of Cambodia's borders, Thailand disagreed with where they put the lines. The most famous dispute has been about an ancient temple called Preah Vihear. This beautiful temple sits on top of a mountain, and both countries have claimed it belongs to them. In 1962, the International Court of Justice decided that the temple belongs to Cambodia. However, Thailand never fully accepted this decision. Over the years, there have been many small incidents along the border. Soldiers from both sides have faced each other. Sometimes there have been shootings. But the situation in July 2025 was different because it was much bigger and more serious than before. The current border problems also relate to modern issues. Both countries want to control areas that might have natural resources like oil or gas. They also want to control important trade routes. In today's world, borders are not just about land, they're about economics and national pride. Some experts believe that domestic politics in both countries made the situation worse. When politicians want to look strong and patriotic, they sometimes take aggressive positions about border disputes. This can make compromise more difficult. Understanding this history helps us see that the July 2025 conflict was not just a sudden explosion of violence. It was the result of long-standing disagreements that had never been properly resolved. Chapter 8, The Cost of Conflict. As the fighting continued, both Thailand and Cambodia began to count the real costs of their border conflict. These costs were much higher than just the money spent on weapons and soldiers. The human cost was the most tragic. Families were separated, children couldn't go to school, elderly people with medical conditions couldn't get their medicines. Some people died not from bullets or bombs, but from the stress and difficulty of being displaced from their homes. The economic cost was enormous. Trade between the two countries stopped completely. This affected not just big companies, but small businesses too. A Thai fruit seller who normally sold mangoes to Cambodia lost all his Cambodian customers. A Cambodian textile factory that exported clothes to Thailand had to stop production. The cost to repair the damage would be millions of dollars. Roads, bridges, and buildings were destroyed by the fighting. It would take months or even years to rebuild everything, but some things, like people's sense of security, would be much harder to repair. Tourism, which brings billions of dollars to both countries every year, was severely affected. Tourists canceled their trips to Thailand and Cambodia. Hotels, restaurants, and tour companies lost customers. Many people who worked in tourism lost their jobs. The international reputation of both countries was damaged. Foreign investors became worried about the stability of the region. Some companies canceled planned investments. The conflict made both countries look unreliable and dangerous to the outside world. But perhaps the biggest cost was the loss of trust between the two peoples. For years, Thai and Cambodian people living along the border had been friends and neighbors. They had married each other, done business together, and shared cultural traditions. The conflict damaged these relationships and created suspicion and fear. Chapter 9, Voices from the Border. In all the news about soldiers and governments, it's easy to forget about the ordinary people whose lives were turned upside down by the conflict. Let me share some of their stories with you. Anand, a 32-year-old rice farmer from Thailand, had his fields right next to the Cambodia border. "I planted rice 6 months ago," he said. "Now I can't harvest it because of the fighting. My whole year's work is lost. How will I feed my family?" On the Cambodian side, Srepov, a mother of 3 children, described her evacuation. "My youngest daughter is only 2 years old. She doesn't understand why we had to leave our home. She keeps asking when we can go back. I don't know what to tell her." Teachers from both sides of the border were particularly affected. Kamon, a Thai teacher, had 150 students in his school. "These children should be learning math and reading," he said. "Instead, they're learning about war and fear. This is not the education they deserve." Some people tried to maintain hope despite the difficult situation. Bofa, a Cambodian shopkeeper, said, "Thai and Cambodian people are not enemies. We are neighbors. We share the same food, similar languages, and many traditions. This fighting will end, and we will be friends again." Border guards from both countries, who used to work together to prevent smuggling and help travelers, found themselves on opposite sides of a conflict. Many of them had developed friendships over the years. Now they had to point guns at people they had once shared meals with. The stories of these ordinary people remind us that conflicts between countries are really conflicts between human beings. Behind every news report about casualties and displaced people are real individuals with families, dreams, and hopes for the future. Chapter 10, The International Response. As news of the Thailand-Cambodia border conflict spread around the world, many countries and international organizations began to respond. The international community understood that this wasn't just a local problem, it could affect peace and stability in all of Southeast Asia. The United Nations took immediate action. The Secretary General made a public statement calling for both countries to stop fighting and start negotiating. UN peacekeeping experts began to discuss whether international peacekeepers might be needed to separate the two armies. The European Union expressed deep concern about the violence. European diplomats offered to help mediate between Thailand and Cambodia. They had experience helping to solve similar conflicts in other parts of the world. Japan, which has strong economic relationships with both countries, sent special envoys to Bangkok and Phnom Penh. Japanese companies had invested billions of dollars. in Thailand and Cambodia, and they were worried about their investments. Japan offered to help fund reconstruction efforts if the fighting stopped. Australia and New Zealand, as neighbors in the Asia Pacific region, called for immediate peace talks. They offered to host negotiations between the two countries on neutral territory. The reaction from ordinary people around the world was also significant. Social media was filled with messages of support for the displaced people. Hashtags like Pray for Peace and Thai-Cambodia conflict trended on Twitter. People shared photos and videos showing the human cost of the conflict. International humanitarian organizations launched emergency appeals for donations. Money poured in from around the world to help provide food, water, medical care, and shelter for the displaced families. The global response showed something important. In our connected world, conflicts in one region affect people everywhere. The international community has both the responsibility and the ability to help solve these problems.
Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of Tom's incredible story about the Thailand Cambodia border conflict. What a journey we've been on together, from peaceful border villages to international crisis, from ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances to world leaders trying to find solutions. Tom has shown us that conflicts between countries are never simple. They involve history, politics, economics, and most importantly, human lives. We've seen how a dispute about borders can quickly escalate into serious fighting, and how innocent people always pay the highest price. But Tom's story also shows us something hopeful. We've seen how people help each other in difficult times. We've seen how the international community comes together to try to solve problems. And we've learned that even in the darkest situations, people continue to hope for peace. This story is still happening right now as we speak. The situation between Thailand and Cambodia continues to develop. By the time you listen to this, there may be new developments. That's why it's so important to stay informed about world events and to care about what happens to people in other countries. Remember, conflicts like this one remind us why diplomacy and peaceful problem solving are so important. They show us why we need strong international organizations like the United Nations. And they teach us that we all share responsibility for creating a more peaceful world. As English learners, stories like this help you understand not just the language, but also the world we live in. You're learning to communicate in English so you can be part of global conversations about important issues like this one. Thank you so much for joining Tom and me on this important journey today. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Have a wonderful day, take care, and see you next time on Learn English Through Story.